Okay, today we're gonna learn how to program in Arduino, and we just have a very simple code. And this code, it does two things. One is when we have say we're gonna have a button connected to our input 1 or input 2. When the button is pressed twice in a row, it will turn on input 12, which is a light or whatever it's going to be. And then when the button's pressed a third time, it will turn off input 12. So now to test our code out, what we've done is we've got a wire shoved into input 12. Actually, it's output 12. And we've got a wire shoved into the ground. And I've connected these with my Wagos to my multimeter, which will measure the DC voltage across these two pins. And then I've got another wire connected to ground on the other side. Sorry, not ground. I've got, another wire is connected to ground, and another wire is connected to our input right here. Now, there's two ways to do this. You can connect your wire to ground, or you can connect it to 5 volts on the other side. But when you're working with buttons, connecting to 5 volts is terrible because you start to get phantom voltages, and the Arduino thinks that somebody's pressing the button when they're not, which is a disaster. Now, second thing I've done here is I've set up a serial monitor, which is on, and then I've created some like hooks inside the code to spit out what we're doing now. This is 92 lines of code, but we could probably have done it faster. So I'm gonna take a look here. So my first section declares my variables, what they are, and you'll always see in an Arduino you'll always have your variables at the beginning. So declare your variables. It's basic C or C++, and then we've got our void setup. So void setup runs one time. As soon as the Arduino turns on, it runs the void setup once. So in this case, the void setup is going to set the pins. So I've got pin mode, pin interior, and pin exterior. So I've chosen pins 1 and 2 to be my inputs. So I've given them names based on where they are going to be, and then I've told the Arduino that those are inputs, and then I've got the pin 12, which is my relay. I've given it a fancy name, and I've told the Arduino that's an output. And then I've got inputs for the pull-ups. So this, when you give, actually these two lines are redundant. We don't need these. But if we have input pull-up, what that's telling the Arduino is that input will measure 5 volts unless it's interrupted, which is really important when you have a button, so you don't get those phantom voltages. And so now we've turned off our relay when the Arduino starts, and then we've set some of our variables up here, and we've created a serial output so that we can measure what happens. Now the second set of code is a void loop. So anything in the void loop just runs in circles. So the first thing I've done here is I've created we're measuring the time that the Arduino has turned on, and that's really important for this code. And then we've created an if statement. So if the pin 1, which is pin interior as we set up, is off, so that means that basically button 1 is pressed. So then we increment our count. So our count starts at 0. And so then if either of these pins is activated, our count increases. And it's important to do that because it doesn't matter which pin, they both can trigger the same thing. So they're both if statements, and now we have a delay of 2 seconds, so that allows the system to wait between inputs, because a button can be pressed and held down, so we don't want to count it twice. Now, if a count is equal to 1, we're going to start our timer. So our timer picks up the actual time and tracks it. Okay, the button's been pressed once. And so this way, if the button is pressed once, then after 10 seconds, if you press the button a second time, so 10 seconds or later, it won't count as twice. It'll count as the first press. And so we do that by measuring after the first press here. If we've exceeded 10 seconds, then we reset the count to 0. Now if the count is 2, that means that the button's been pressed twice in a row, and so we turn on our relay to high. And then if the button's been pressed a third time, we turn off our relay. So we set our relay to low, and then we wait a second. So this lets the system react, and we set our count back to 0. So this lets the system start all over again. Now we'll take these 2 wires here, which I've stripped, and we've got our multimeter, and we've got our serial display. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to short these 2. These are my button, basically. So I've pressed that, and so now it's told me the count is 1. So now if I do this a second time, now if I'm within 10 seconds, so it wasn't within 10 seconds. So I'm going to do it again. Okay, so now the count is 2. You can see our voltage has gone up to 4.7 volts. So that's a 5 volt that's coming out of the Arduino. And if I do it a third time, oops. Now the count is 3. Now our voltage has shut off. So you can see this wide angle. Oops. Try to do it with one hand here. Short this out twice, 3 times. So once, twice, 3 times. So if you have any questions, please post a comment. Thank you.